All right. Thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here. I think everyone knows we've been talking about this for a while, what the second semester is going to look like. Before I get into that, I want to make sure I thank everyone and get everyone to understand something. I saw this yesterday, and I've got some props today. Can you tell what this is? This is a perfect example of where we are this year, upside down. I mean, everything is tipsy-turvy, and as we approach the anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, it was making me think about the terrible times that this country has faced when they were in a war, and how they rose to be the greatest generation ever. And I think our children are probably in one of those moments of a lifetime where they're having to rise above where they really would like to be. I don't think in World War II anyone was where they wanted to be or facing the challenges and the tragedies they had to face. And I think we're just like that right now. I think that the overwhelming fear of this virus, the loss of life, the illnesses that are coming about for many of our American family, friends, is just a tragedy. And I think we have to realize that we're all doing the best we can. Students, I think, for the most part, are doing the best they can. Parents, family members doing the best they can, but we're not giving enough credit to the teachers. The teachers have been just overwhelmed with trying to do everything for everybody and be everything for everybody. I got some headlines. This was in the New York Times recently, and the headline says, "Teaching in the Pandemic, This is Not Sustainable." And you guys can have it. I'm going to read some quotes out of it. You okay? You gotta go get some water. And this one also, I was reading, there's been a lot of reports from the NWEA on the learning loss this year was not as bad as was projected. And in fact, there's even some good news in some of the math, but we're still behind. We're not where we would normally be. And so those are all things that we read and study about, and we're paying great attention to detail. I'm going to tell you, if people ask me, am I concerned about this or I'm worried about that, there's not a lot of this I'm worried about because I can't control. There's no use worrying about things you can't control. One of my major concerns, though, is the continued growth and education of our students. And many of them are just not being successful in any kind of distance learning. There are some that are thriving with it, but most of them are not. We have 83% of our students right now are in brick and mortar, and that number keeps growing every day. We've done surveys of the parents we've surveyed, the ones that are in Baylink. We believe at least 50% of those will be coming back to school, if not more. And those that are homeschool or are doing Florida virtual, they've been doing that before, most of them, and they'll continue to be able to do that. But we are going to sunset Baylink, and what I mean by that, at the end of the first semester, Baylink will no longer be an option for the second semester. Now, that's if everything goes the way it's looking right now, and we don't have some kind of huge problem where we have to go back and figure out how to deal with distance learning. But right now, we all know, and I've got studies, and you've seen the data, the students are not the ones suffering from this terrible virus, and I count that as a blessing. I don't know how many other people do, but I certainly count that as a blessing. No one wants to see children, so we don't want to see anyone suffer, but I think families for centuries have done everything they could to protect their children, and so I think that is just one of the amazing blessings we've had with this, is it is not a child issue. So we are going to, the attachments, everything's going to be posted online, and you've gotten this. We've sent all this out to teachers. Parents will have, Baylink won't be an option for this point, for the second semester. And I know that that's going to be upsetting to some, and I do understand that. It's just our teachers cannot keep doing this at this pace that we're asking them to do. They're working 12, 14, 15 hours a day, trying to keep pace. It would be like having two families, a mom or dad having a family at work and then having a family at home and trying to manage both of them at the same time. And we just can't sustain that. We can't expect our teachers to sustain that. When we started that, We did it because we knew we had to think outside the box to do things because we didn't know enough about the virus and everyone was scared. Many people were fearful to send their children to school. I think that fear is unrealistic now for most children. There are some, I understand, with certain conditions in the home or certain immunities that children don't have that as an option and they will have to stay home. But we've always had that. That has always been an issue. There's always been options for them. And so virtual school will continue to be an option. Homeschool will continue to be an option. But we do believe wholeheartedly that most students need to be in brick and mortar. There's just some numbers I want to share with you. 1 in 4 homeless children in this country have basically just dropped off the map since this started in March. We don't know where these children are. Many of them aren't getting fed, they're not getting taken care of, they're not being watched after, and so we have to get all students accounted for. And this isn't just in Bay County, this is again all over the country. I know my friends down in Hillsborough County, I believe they're looking for 7,000 students right now that they can't find. And I know we're constantly looking for hundreds of our students that can't find, but that homelessness is a big issue. Poverty is a big issue. I've got a lot of friends that we agree on a lot of things, but we disagree on the issue of poverty and education. Poverty is a huge backpack that many kids carry around that impacts their ability to do well and be successful in school. And we know that if they're not in school, they're hurting more than not. And so we need our children back in school. If they are healthy and there's no reason at home why they can't be back in school, then I believe everyone will tell you, including the governor and the commissioner of education, that they need to be back in school. I can't thank the teachers enough, and we've been working with the teachers and the teachers unions trying to put this all together. We know we will still have students quarantined, and we talked about that yesterday with you, and we are waiting for the Department of Health to look at those new CDC guidelines and see if we can soften those quarantines. I don't like having to quarantine students, and to be very candid with you, I know we probably shouldn't be quarantining most of the students we are, but I'm not a guideline writer. I don't work for the CDC, I don't work for the Department of Health, but we're going to follow the professionals. You know, there's been a lot of talk over the past 6 to 8 months over science and listening to the experts. That's what we're doing. And then we get criticized when we do it. I get some parents are mad because we're requiring masks. I got some parents mad because not everyone is wearing a mask. It doesn't make any difference. There's somebody on each side that's telling us what to do. The school board decided when all this started that we were going to follow the CDC guidelines. We will continue to follow the CDC guidelines until the school board decides otherwise. My proposal Tuesday is for them to limit the options, as I've stated earlier, and the options will exclude Baylink. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of talk about this on social media, a lot of concern about this, and the only thing I can tell you is this. Most of our quarantines are coming from outside influences. They're coming from social gatherings, they're coming from extracurricular activities, they're not coming from what's going on in the classroom. And so I've had some athletes, their parents have said, well, I want my child to stay on Baylink so they can keep playing sports. And I understand that, but sports are an important part of education, but they're not what we're about. We're about education, and we need to get our children back in school. We need to have them back in school so they can thrive and learn and grow. They're going to need that education to help fight future pandemics and future issues and challenges like this. And so we have heard a lot of the concerns, but we do believe that we're taking the best road for everybody when we say that Baylink needs to sunset. I've had individual conversations with each board member to express to them why we believe that. I can't thank Denise Kelly enough and her team for putting all this together and turning our plan into the state. It is turned in now, right?
It's going today.
It's going today. That has to be approved by the state. But I've talked to the chancellor probably 4 times in the last 2 days. I've talked to the commissioner twice this week. The superintendents, have been on conference calls all week talking about options and challenges and what we're dealing with. no one wants to be dealing with what we're dealing with right now, but this is what we're having to deal with. I want to remind you, no one in 1941, 1942, 1943, 1944 wanted to be dealing with what they were dealing with. But they rose to the occasion and dealt. Now, I'm not trying to compare what we're dealing with the tragedies of what they're dealing with, but each generation is called to meet certain challenges. I believe this generation of students, this challenge is going to make them stronger. I believe that they're going to get through it and thrive through it. I think we'll be better because of it. But right now, I know sometimes it seems like the world's crowding in around them and caving in on them, which brings me to my final point. We know that our students are going to be better off if we provide the wellness services that they need. I want to read a stat to you. According to a recent survey, 50% of students report worsening mental health since the beginning of the pandemic. 35% say their family relationships are worse than ever before, and they feel more anxious and lonely. Those statistics are from the United States, all over, not this country, just not Bay County. And so, but a lot of areas haven't even had brick and mortar schools. We've got brick and mortar schools. We know when students are sitting by their peers, they are going to be better off, they're going to be healthier, they're going to be more thriving. And that's what we're asking the parents to do, is to trust us to continue to do that the best we can. Now with that, Denise?
I don't know if Denise has anything to add. No.
All right, I will, did I miss anything, Sharon?
No, I think you got it.
I know you guys have questions.
Yes.
We're gonna go, no, you don't have to. Let the boys start first. Let Tony go first.
Right, so we talked about yesterday about quarantine. Right now, you guys are still sticking with the 14-day period, but if there was a child next semester that has to quarantine for 2 weeks, is the online option still gonna be?
Good question. No, but we'll have Canvas. We've been working with Union to make sure that the teachers understand how significant and important Canvas is. That's something we had before the pandemic, but Canvas is the platform that now all students have access to, and so they can get the work that the teacher puts out there for them. And teachers can still do videos if they want. The teacher's going to be able to do it as they want. There's not going to be a requirement of live instruction, which is what Baylink was. So great question, but we know we'll still have quarantining, and Canvas is going to be the avenue for that, for those teachers to provide that for those students. Good question, Tony. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so back in October, I was talking with the principal at Breakfast Point Academy, and he was saying that you guys wouldn't know until the end of the quarter the disparity between test scores. So what did that look like between Baylake students and in person, the brick and mortar students? How did those test scores compare?
Everything's lower in Baylake. And that's when you collect the averages, because the percentage of those students that participate in Baylink, and I think she sent that to you too. Did you give them any numbers on the Baylink participation?
They can see it on our website.
Yeah, it's on our website. The Baylink participation of actually being involved is much lower. It's really low. I think it's less than 50% in many of the schools. And so we know they're not thriving that way. I mean, that's part of the documented evidence we have where Baylink cannot continue the way it's going, because what we have is we have at least half the students in many schools aren't doing anything, but the teachers are doing 100% of what they're supposed to do to try to get them to. So it's wasting a lot of energy and time when those kids need to be back in school. I can tell you there's case after case after case, and one of the concerns I have right now, and I mentioned concerns, are the seniors. There's a lot of seniors out there that aren't paying attention, and they think they're just going to walk across stage and get a diploma, and that's false. They are not going to be just getting a diploma. You remember last year, we were very full of grace and understanding at the end of the year, because we only had 9 weeks left for those seniors, and they all basically have done everything. This year, these seniors have a whole year to do things, and many of them are already behind the 8 ball, and they're thinking they're just going to walk across the stage, and they're not. We're going to have meetings with them next month. We're going to each school and talk to those seniors about telling them they need to get busy and get to work, because they have to be serious about it. We don't want seniors to be 5th year seniors. We want them to graduate on time, and that is one of our biggest concerns. Yes, ma'am.
As far as numbers go, how many students have had to leave school due to the coronavirus this year so far?
It's on our website, but actually the number we've quarantined is over 1,000. But the number of students that have actually gotten it is very low. And part of that is...
Do you know what that number is?
It's on the website.
It's on the website. But I was reading this morning. In fact, I sent it to the chancellor in Tallahassee. I was reading an article this morning of a study that was done, I don't know, Midwest state or something, that said that most students don't even have symptoms. You know, the symptoms we're looking for are fever. That kids aren't getting the fever, and so they're it's called asymptomatic. They're not having those symptoms, and so, you know, the quarantining is what we're required to do by CDC guidelines. But what we found is most of the quarantine, the kids aren't getting it, and so that's why the parents are so frustrated. And I understand why the parents are frustrated, but they're fussing at the wrong people. We're not the ones making that decision. We are following the guidelines as put forth by people that are the experts. All right, we're going to go back. You get the next one.
Okay, cool. So Baylink allowed you all to more easily socially distance in the classrooms, but now that everyone's coming back, how are we going to handle that?
Well, some of the new guidelines even talk about 3 foot instead of 6 foot, and they say that students, as long as they wear a mask, are much safer. So we still believe it's not going to be an issue. We still believe that the 3 foot, and again, that's all part of the study I was reading, that the students for some reason seem to be more immune to it, but they're not getting it in the classroom. Even, I believe that if they will wash their hands, hand sanitize, wear their masks, they're going to be fine. That's what we're finding out everywhere. Where they're getting is when they let their guard down, when they go to parties, when they go to social gatherings, when they're going to their practices and sports. And look, and I've said this before, we're not stopping sports. I know that there are some states that have said we're just stopping also. That's not going to solve anything. These kids need to thrive on that. But when someone does get it and we have to isolate them and quarantine, we will quarantine them because we're looking at the whole group then, not just an individual. So parents have made that decision. They want their children to play sports, and we support that. But we're still going to follow the CDC guidelines. But I don't believe that students are any more susceptible to it if they're within 3 feet wearing a mask and taking care of doing everything else they're supposed to do. I really believe they're safe, and there are studies out there that kind of support what I'm saying.
Hindsight's 2020. How would you describe Baylink this semester? You talked about students were struggling in Baylink, but back when you guys implemented, it looked like it was a pretty good option. How would you describe Baylink?
Yeah, I think considering what we knew back then when we had to do it, it was great. Winston Chester, one of our new school board members, is here, and I was thinking about how I was going to share this with you, and I didn't use the analogy. I went with World War II instead of this, but I'm a former football coach. You go into every game with a game plan. You don't keep that game plan if it's not working. I mean, if you, after you go into a while, it might be halftime, might even be before then, at a certain point you say, hey, well, we're working, what we're doing is not working, we need to change. And that's where we're at right now. I think that our game plan was solid, and I think it served its purpose when we didn't know what we didn't know. And you've got to remember, back in August when we started school, there were a lot of parents that were afraid their children were going to get this and get sick from it. I literally had an email from a parent that said I was going to be responsible for 10,000 students to be orphans. Now, what do you think about those kind of emails? I mean, you know, when you get things like that, you get those kind of threats, you scratch your head and wonder, am I doing something wrong? So I think at that time our game plan was very solid, but I think now we see the game more clear now. We know more about our opponent. We know what they can and can't do. We know that students are more resilient against this virus than anybody else. We know that the teachers will keep their distance away from them and wear their masks, and the students wear their masks. Everyone's going to be much safer, and that's the key to this. Did I get that right, Winston?
That sounds good.
So basically, you know, a big concern you said was also teachers, not just students struggling, but also the teacher aspect. How much stress do you think this is going to alleviate from teachers now that they don't have to spend, you know, extra hours putting up all the stuff on Baylink and Canvas?
I've been in this business for 39 years, and I can tell you this is going to be a big relief to them, but I've also been a teacher. They'll have something else to stress about. Teachers find things to stress about. It's just what they do because they are so wanting to be perfect. Teachers want everything to be exactly the way they want it, and they're very organized, and so I think this is going to be a big relief to them, but then they'll come up with something else to stress over. We're hoping this relieves a lot of stress. One of the things I wish I could remove from their stress right now is their VAM score and the school grades. I personally believe that DOE is going to realize they can't do that this year, but they have not done that yet, and I know teachers are stressing over that. I would tell teachers, do the best you can, and we've got your back, is what I'm telling you.
Can you clarify what a BAM score is?
It's value-added measurement. What it is, it takes the students they teach and measures how much they've learned in a year as compared to everybody else in the state. So if your students earn a year and a half in your class and they only earned a half year in the other class, then your VAM score is going to be very high and that other teacher's going to be very low. So they worry about those comparisons, but what I'm telling you, all across the country, everybody's worried about how successful students are going to be. I think everybody's trying to do the best they can. The key is keep trying to do the best you can. Don't give up, keep trying. Don't give up, keep trying. That's the key. That's what we tell our athletes.
Do you think that more students will still transition to Bay Virtual School now that the Baylink option is no longer available?
I think some will. I think most, my gut is the parents I've talked to and the grandparents I've talked to want to go back to school and they're planning on going back to school after the Christmas break. Most of them just miss their friends. But then there are some out there that have very legitimate reasons for not coming back, and I understand that. So that will be an option. We've got some that have decided to homeschool. There's a neat little program that Florida Virtual has where they can homeschool and link to Florida Virtual, so that is an option for some. But I'm telling you, what we found out in the spring of last year, April, May, and June, parents don't want to be teachers. They realized how hard it was. So I think that most parents, for the most part, again, I will be shocked if we're not over 90% of our students back in brick and mortar come January. That's what I'm predicting. Tony's turn.
Good. I got more questions.
You don't have any more questions?
So this is happening no matter what, even if there's a super spike in January as doctors are predicting.
Well, this is my recommendation. The board has the final say so. My recommendation to the board is to do this, and we just wanted to get it out there so everyone could digest it. You know, again, the spikes, and I pay attention to the data just like you do, and if you'll look on the COVID data for Bay County, you'll see that children and teenagers aren't the ones getting this. They're not the ones getting this. I mean, there are some, but it's the adults getting this. And so, again, that is a blessing. I mean, if I had to pick which group to get it, and I think most of us would agree, let us get it. Don't let the kids get it. So, I mean, that's what's happening. And I think that children are going to be fine and they need to be back in school for the most part. There's always an exception. But to answer your question, you know, who knows what January, February, March is going to hold. You know, everybody's thinking by June this is all going to be over with. They keep talking about the vaccine, but half the people in the country aren't going to get the vaccine. United Kingdom today said that they might be wearing masks for 2 years. Nobody knows what's going to happen with this, but I would say right now, knowing what we know now, knowing the opponent we have, COVID right now, and having the science and the data we have right now with COVID, I think the best plan moving forward is my recommendation to the board on Tuesday.
As far as your recommendation goes, so the next steps, it has to be approved by the school board on what date?
Tuesday.
Okay, and then from there, if it's approved, it goes before the state, or does it go before the state no matter what?
The state just has the plan. The state won't get involved in what options we have because they've already approved our options before. We just had to turn in, the plan we had to turn in to the state was more about the remediation of students that are so far behind, which brings me to another point. We've got students that, you know, because of the hurricane, we haven't talked about the hurricane in a while, have we? Because of the hurricane, our students were already almost a year behind. You remember it hit in October, and so those students struggled all year. And then we had COVID after three-fourths of the year, so you've got that 2 years back to back, and now we're into the third year of problems for kids. So our students are much further behind than they should be, and we've got to figure out ways to remediate and offer options for those parents to help their children. You're going to hear eventually about Saturday school and maybe even some evening school for students and options for parents to remediate their children. We believe the new CARES Act, the new funding that we'll get from the state, will allow us to fund that for teachers to do these remediations and help these kids pull up. I got an email recently from, I can't remember if it was from a grandparent or a parent, talking about that their child was in kindergarten when the hurricane hit, and now they're in second grade and they still don't know how to read. Well, and the grandparents said, look, they've had all these interruptions. By now they should be able to start reading, but they've had all these, and we know this. But again, this isn't anything that we did. This is just where we are, and we've got to rise above it and continue to work forward.